Okay, this is lesson 73, and is it possible to achieve all the government's macro objectives at the same time? The macro objectives are full employment, price stability, economic growth and balance of payments equilibrium. In theory, of course, you can start the essay and say, well, it's actually pretty easy to achieve all the macro objectives at the same time, because all you just do is you just increase AS and you increase AS, and then you also just increase AD, and if you increase them at the same rate, you're going to get a zero output gap, and hey presto, you're going to have price stability, full employment, high economic growth, and if your supply side is really strong, then your exports are going to increase, so you're going to be okay. And that is really the gist of the essay, so it's possible. However, I think a really good essay is going to pick out that the UK has a few issues at this moment in time. For example, it's got a high level of national debt, it's printed loads and loads and loads of money, it's got very low productivity recently, it's still got a record trade deficit. So there are issues concerning how we actually can achieve or improve all those macro objectives at the same time. However, if you look back in the past and you assume that the UK economy hadn't made any mistakes in the past, so throughout the nice decade it had followed different policies from the ones at which it followed, you could have argued, in fact, that perhaps we could have achieved all the macro objectives at the same time. Improve them all. Okay, but let's start on with here, and we reached the year 2007. We'd had 10 years of miraculous economic growth. Everything was fine, and Gordon Brown made the very famous statement that we've abolished boom and bust. 1 year later, what happened was that we had a massive recession. In fact, we had a demand side shock, and I would probably argue, as would Jeff Rubin, that we had a supply side shock, which then led on to a demand side shock. But we had a demand side shock, there was a banking crisis, house prices fell in America, supply side shock, the price of oil went up to $150 a barrel. So all of these things meant, therefore, that we weren't achieving any objectives. In fact, all we were achieving was lower growth, higher inflation, and more unemployment. However, we have recovered since then, and right now in 2014, we've got lower unemployment, lower inflation, good growth, and the only black mark is the fact that we have a pretty large trade deficit. Okay, this is one thing that really annoys me whenever I come to mock exams as an examiner. Students always talk about the Phillips Curve. So they draw a line on here and they draw it. In fact, they normally put inflation here rather than rate of change of money wages, which is similar to inflation, I admit. And they say, okay, we can have a choice in the economy. We can either have high inflation and low unemployment, or we can have high unemployment, and even in this case, so I stumbled a bit then looking at it, we can have negative inflation. So we have a choice in society. Perhaps I should have drawn this a little bit further out here. That would have been safer. However, this evidence was based on Phillips, who made the observation between 1861 and 1913. Okay, so he drew up a line and there were lots of dots around here, which therefore meant that his theory was in fact correct. And then he followed that up with 1913 to 1957 and said, well, also this data also conforms to that, therefore I make this prediction. Okay, but we now live in the year 2014. We do not live in the year 1940 or 1930s. Okay, there is an element of truth in the Phillips curve, because when we draw the Keynesian AS curve, that there is a trade-off between the two. As we move up towards full employment, then it's likely that we're going to get higher inflation. However, I think now most economists would argue that it's possible to achieve falling inflation and falling unemployment at the same time, which is what we're doing right now. Now, there are loads of conflicts within the UK economy, which I've already spoken about previously, which is there's a conflict here if you print money, MV equals PT, and that may lead to inflation. It may also help us to increase demand when we're in a great big recession. We have problems, as already mentioned. We have UK national debt, the fact we printed money, and also we have a low exchange rate, although it's rising recently, which helps to create inflation. However, there are some policies which I think are win-win. Low corporation tax, which I keep on bleating on about. Low corporation tax is now 21%. It's going to fall in the future, and it's a win-win situation because we lower the corporation tax and we get more money back. And then we could draw the Laffer curve. Freeman, who is a monetarist, talks about the natural rate of unemployment, which I do later on in the A2 course, and he said that the Phillips curve is now vertical. And what you have to do is you try and move it inwards. This is the natural rate of unemployment, and if you can do that, then you can reduce unemployment. Broadly, really, what he is saying is, if you have really good training, the workers have high productivity, very low welfare payments, lots of opportunity for work, then the rate of unemployment will fall and it will not create inflation. That's the broad basis of his theory, but we'll cover that later on in the course. Even with the threat of oil prices, which Jeff Rubin says has caused 9 out of the last 10 recessions, we can actually get over that problem because we can innovate and we can use nuclear fusion, or we could use renewable technology, which is an interim technology. And so it needn't be the case that the oil price or resources or energy has to go up in price. It may actually, certainly if we have nuclear fusion, it's going to drop dramatically. And even if we use renewable technology, by very much definition, the more we use it, it doesn't necessarily go up in price. So we can get over these problems, but only if we innovate and only if we spend lots of money on research and development. There are some countries in the world which have been able to achieve a lot of their macro objectives, e.g. China. China has falling unemployment, very high rates of growth, it has an extremely high trade surplus, and it also has achieved relative price stability over the last 30 years. The only thing that's gone wrong with China is that there is environmental deprivation. In fact, in the world today, out of the largest 10 cities in the world, the most polluting cities of the world, 7 out of those 10 can all be found in China. There's some pretty astonishing figures about the environmental degradation in China, but it has achieved high rates of growth. So there is a conflict in there, but not with the traditional macroeconomic objectives. Also, we can look at Germany, which I think has probably been one of the most successful economies in the world at achieving everything all at once. Even when they brought in East Germany, which added an extra 25 million people to their population, Germany has continued to do well. It has a trade surplus, the unemployment rate is falling, inflation is very, very stable, they have very high productivity. So it's a good economy to look at. The same with South Korea, has also achieved that. So right now with the UK, I think with the UK, it's going to be incredibly difficult because of all of these reasons. UK national debt, we're printing money, low exchange rates, the threat of oil prices going up. So there's a lot of external factors that will make it very difficult for the UK to achieve all of its macro objectives. However, let's assume that they were able to increase AS, maybe it follows the IOD route, maybe we suddenly come across lots of shale gas and that shifts out the AS curve. In that case, we've just been lucky. Maybe we suddenly export loads more goods to the BRIC countries and the Mint countries, Brazil, Russia, India and China. I think this one is Malaysia, Indonesia, Nigeria and Thailand. So if we're able to export to all those countries, we export about 5% of our goods to BRIC at this moment in time, but we're certainly able to get into those markets, so we get export-led growth, then we can say that it's possible that we've achieved all of those objectives. But that is going to take a huge supply-side push. Okay, so lesson 53, it is possible to achieve all the macro objectives at the same time. Countries have proved it, although in the case of the UK, it's going to be very, very difficult. Try writing an essay.